Hello and welcome to INET. On this special report, INET takes a look back at the year that was 2013. From long-running wars to landmark peace agreements, from notable births and deaths to the latest and greatest in technology, INET takes a look back at 2013 in review. We begin our coverage for 2013 with violence in the Middle East, and INET's #1 news story for 2013 was the war in Syria. Syria's civil war started back in 2011 when citizens demanded the resignation of their president, Bashar al-Assad. The protests quickly grew into a full-on civil war. The Syrian civil war was dominated by three main features in 2013. A chemical weapons attack in the capital Damascus on August 21st. That attack killed more than 1,000 people. The constant bickering of international politicians over what to do about the crisis, and the refugee crisis that the war has sparked. Meanwhile, more than 80,000 people are thought to have been killed by the fighting, and there is no end in sight. Egypt was also a major source of news in 2013. Back in 2012, Egyptians elected Mohamed Morsi as their president. While Morsi was democratically elected, it was by a slim margin, and many Egyptians were dissatisfied with the way he was ruling the country. All that dissatisfaction led to massive protests in late June. After the protests started to take shape, the Egyptian military gave the new president an ultimatum: stop the protests or the military would. That deadline passed, and the military staged a coup that forced Morsi out of office. Since the coup, Egypt has been under military rule. The media in Egypt is widely oppressed, and the country has seen countless protests. The military has promised new elections will be held soon, but no firm deadline has been given. On April 24, 2013, 1,100 garment factory workers were killed in Bangladesh when the Rana Plaza factory complex collapsed. Cracks in the building had been discovered the previous day, but the workers were ordered to return to work. In the aftermath, some 2,000 people were pulled out of the wreckage alive. The incident drew worldwide condemnation of working conditions in Bangladeshi factories, many of which supply clothing to Western retailers. In the aftermath of the collapse, the factory owners of the complex were arrested, and many Western retailers pledged to improve working conditions in Bangladesh. The United States made headlines in 2013 when details of their widespread electronic spying program surfaced. It all started in late June when the UK's Guardian newspaper published documents leaked to the paper by the former NSA analyst Edward Snowden. The documents detailed how the NSA tracked the metadata of telephone calls. Throughout the year, the leaks continued, and soon it became clear that the NSA also monitors emails entering and exiting the United States and routinely requests information from large U.S. internet companies. In October, additional allegations surfaced that the U.S. tapped the phones of French citizens and even the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The NSA has received widespread condemnation from countries around the world, including U.S. allies. Meanwhile, Snowden, the analyst that leaked the information in the first place, is currently hiding from U.S. authorities in Russia. The United States again made headlines in 2013 when their government was temporarily shut down. The shutdown went something like this. Radical right-wing Republicans, upset about the U.S. president's socialized medicine program, forced the Republican Party to prevent the budget from passing. The result was that on the 1st of October, all non-essential government programs were shut down. Things became really scary when the United States came dangerously close to reaching the artificially imposed borrowing limit. Had they reached that limit, then they would have ended up defaulting on their debt. Eventually, though, enough Republicans voted against the radicals, and a temporary budget was passed. It has been described as the largest storm ever on the face of the earth, and Typhoon Haiyan was aimed squarely at the Philippines. The monster storm made landfall on the southern coast of the Philippines on November 7th and caused massive damage and loss of life. The storm wiped out infrastructure, and even though the international community rose up in support of the Philippines, aid was slow to arrive where it was needed most. The country is still recovering from the disaster, and the final death toll is unclear, but it has already surpassed 6,000. People across the world were shocked when news of a horrific attack at the Westgate shopping mall in Kenya surfaced in late September. The attack was reportedly perpetrated by al-Shabaab militants, upset about Kenya's military involvement in Somalia. The attack started on September 21st when gunmen forced their way into the mall and opened fire. Police and military crews responded after the initial reports of gunfire, but militants managed to stay inside the mall for some 3 days. Eventually, Kenyan soldiers managed to take control of the facility. 175 people were killed in that attack. 2013 was a big year for U.S.-Iran relations after the two countries signed a 6-month agreement on Iran's controversial nuclear program. The unprecedented cooperation between the two nations began after Hassan Rouhani was elected president of Iran in June. After being elected president, Rouhani began a series of negotiations with the United States. The two sides eventually came to an agreement on November 24th. The agreement would see the restoration of $4.2 billion in trade with Iran and would ensure the country would not enrich uranium beyond 5%. Residents of Boston, Massachusetts in the United States were shocked when two explosions ripped through the city on the afternoon of April the 15th. The explosions took place near the finish line of the annual Boston Marathon, killed 3 and wounded more than 250. In the days following the attack, the perpetrators were revealed to be Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, two brothers from Russia who had grown up in the United States. After the bombing, police launched a full-scale manhunt for the two brothers, and Tamerlan was killed in a shootout on April the 19th. The second brother was apprehended late in the evening of the same day. The suspected motive of the attack is extremist Islamic beliefs. 2013 marked the end of an era when Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez died in March. Chavez, who is widely popular within Venezuela, led a socialist revolution in the country after being elected president in 1998. Chavez is best known for his socialist reforms within Venezuela and his fiery anti-American speeches outside the country. Venezuela held elections in April in which Chavez's successor, Nicolas Maduro, won a very narrow victory. Nelson Mandela, former South African president and worldwide icon, passed away on December 5th. Mandela is best known for being the first black South African president and taking huge strides in dismantling the old apartheid regime. Mandela had been admitted to hospital twice previously in 2013, both times due to a serious lung infection. Mandela was 95 years old. The United Kingdom also lost a political icon when Margaret Thatcher passed away on April 8th. Thatcher came to power after winning the UK's 1979 general election, a position that she held until 1990. Thatcher is best known for taking on the labour unions in the 1980s, privatising state-owned enterprises, and her handling of the Falklands War in the early 80s. Thatcher's policies were controversial, and many British citizens celebrated upon news of her death. 2013 was a bad year for transportation accidents after 2 train crashes and a plane crash grabbed world headlines. The first took place in Lac-Mégantic, Quebec, Canada on July 6th. A driverless train loaded with oil and out of control screamed into the tiny town just after 1 a.m. local time. The resulting fire destroyed a large swath of the downtown core. 42 people have been confirmed dead, with an additional 5 presumed to be killed. Next, more than 150 people were injured and 2 killed when Asiana Airlines Flight 214 crash-landed at San Francisco International Airport on July 7th. The crash took place after the plane's tail section was ripped off as it approached the landing site. Pilot confusion has been blamed for the crash. Finally, the third incident took place in Spain just a few weeks later on July 24th. A passenger train being driven at excessive speeds derailed into a retaining wall in the north of the country. The crash killed at least 80 people on board the train, and the driver has since been arrested for excessive speeding. In February 2013, North Korea announced they had conducted a secret underground nuclear test. Not surprisingly, the test was condemned by the international community. The nuclear test led to a serious downgrading of relations between North and South Korea, which came to a climax when North Korea declared it was in a state of war with the South and said they had missiles on standby aimed at the United States. North Korea also shut down the Kaesong industrial complex, where many North and South Koreans worked together. Eventually, tensions between all parties de-escalated slightly, leading to the industrial complex's reopening in September. Thailand made headlines in December when citizens took to the street en masse to protest against their president. The protest started on December 1st, and demonstrators are calling for the president Yingluck Shinawatra to resign. Eventually, Ms. Shinawatra dissolved parliament and called for new elections in response to the demonstrations. Also making headlines for mass demonstrations was the nation of Ukraine. Ukrainian citizens took to the streets after their president announced he would not be pursuing a trade agreement with the European Union. Protesters are demanding that the president reevaluate the EU trade agreement and that new elections be held. At least 18 people were killed in Central Europe when the region experienced devastating flooding. At its peak, floodwaters reached levels not seen in more than 500 years. The flooding was caused by days of extremely heavy rainfall. Rain was also the culprit in Alberta, Canada, where major flooding devastated the province's largest city of Calgary. People across Canada were shocked to see the downtown core completely submerged in water. Calgary, not the only victim, the aptly named community of High River was almost completely destroyed by the floodwaters, and 3 people killed in the tiny community. Germany held elections in September, and Chancellor Angela Merkel was re-elected as leader of the country. Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, in partnership with the Christian Social Union, garnered more than 40% of the popular vote. Not enough for a so-called supermajority, but enough to confirm Merkel as leader of the nation for the next 4 years. And finally, 2013 was a landmark year for followers of the Catholic faith when Pope Benedict XVI resigned on February 27th, the first pope to resign in nearly 600 years. Benedict was replaced by Pope Francis I on March 13th. Francis has been widely heralded as the start of a new age for the Catholic Church, publicly softening the Church's hard line against non-believers, gays and lesbians. Francis has also pledged to do more to help the poor. Technology news now, and the virtual currency Bitcoin made headlines in 2013 when the value of the currency skyrocketed. At the beginning of 2013, you could buy a Bitcoin for just under $20 US, but by the end of December, the value had skyrocketed to more than $1,100 US. Bitcoins are described as the world's first digital decentralized currency, and once the exclusive domains of techies has been thrust into the mainstream. Purchasing Bitcoins is getting easier, and in some cases ATMs have been set up for people to exchange the digital currency. Also in 2013, Microsoft released their long-awaited operating system update, Windows 8.1. Windows 8.1 addressed many of the concerns that users had with the Windows 8 operating system, including the re-establishment of the Start button to the desktop. Microsoft has made one thing clear, however: love it or hate it, the new touch-friendly Metro interface is here to stay. Apple Computer released several new products in 2013, including a new iPad, iPad mini, and 2 new iPhones. But the real innovation came when Apple unveiled the design for its new desktop computer, the Mac Pro. Gone is the traditional tower form factor, replaced with a can shape that, when compared with previous generations, is extremely compact. The new Mac Pros are not all good news, with many standardized internal components being replaced with proprietary ones. The Mac Pro goes on sale in late December. Sony and Microsoft made headlines in 2013 when both console makers launched their so-called next-generation consoles, the PS4 and the Xbox One. Microsoft received a heavy dose of criticism early on when they announced that the users of the new console would not be allowed to play games without going through a third party, effectively preventing users from trading and sharing games with each other. Sony quickly announced that the PS4 would be able to play games without paying a so-called unlock fee. Both consoles are geared heavily towards multimedia consumption as well as gaming, with the Xbox One allowing you to control a set-top box and watch live TV through it. Neither console is compatible with previous generation games. And finally, failing cell phone maker BlackBerry tried to stimulate new growth when it launched its brand new BlackBerry 10 operating system and several new phones to go along with it. Unfortunately for the company, consumers refused to bite, and the company's future, especially when it failed to find a buyer, is uncertain. It's now time for INET's Media Moments 2013 edition, and the #1 overcovered news story of the year goes to the birth of Prince George, son of Prince William and Catherine and heir to the British throne. The media started camping outside the King Edward VI Hospital in London days before Catherine was admitted, and after confirmation that the expectant mother was in hospital, the round-the-clock coverage began, with media outlets from across the world breaking into regular programming to cover the spectacle. Qatari government-owned TV network Al Jazeera made a huge push into the US TV market in 2013 when they bought out the now-defunct channel Current TV. Al Jazeera America launched in August and has been on the air for some 4 months. So far, the channel has found attracting viewers difficult, with ratings falling below 22,000 viewers. The Canadian city of Toronto was thrust into the spotlight when allegations that their mayor, Rob Ford, smoked crack cocaine surfaced. The allegations first came to light in May when the website Gawker claimed it had been offered a video of the mayor smoking crack. The video never surfaced, and the story died off until November when RCMP said they had retrieved the crack video. Not long after, Ford admitted to smoking crack while in office. Since the admission, fellow city councillors have been trying to force Ford's resignation, something the mayor has refused to do. 2013 marked the end of an era for the ABC's media analysis program Media Watch when host Jonathan Holmes retired from the Australian program in July. Holmes is succeeded by Paul Berry, another veteran ABC journalist. And the world was fascinated by a meteor that crash-landed in Russia in February. The story became an international sensation because the event was recorded hundreds of times by dash cameras that are so prevalent on Russian roads. The meteor was estimated to be around 17 meters in size and slammed into the ground at more than 18 kilometers per second. More than 1,000 people are thought to have been hurt by the shockwave that the meteor's impact created. And those were the stories that caught our attention in 2013. From all of us here at INET, thanks for watching, and we'll see you right back here again next year.